My grandma doesn't understand what you're saying. Can I read it for her? The woman behind the desk looked up. A little black girl stood on the other side of the counter, barely tall enough to see over it. She was on her toes, both hands gripping the edge. Behind her, an older woman sat in a plastic chair, a bag of medication resting in her lap. She did not look up. She did not need to. She already knew what was happening. The receptionist slid a piece of paper across the counter. The bill was longer than the child's arm. Kiara took it with both hands. She tilted her head to one side and began reading her lips, moving slowly over each word, careful and serious, the way a child reads when she knows the words are too big, but the job is hers anyway. Brenda glanced at the screen, then back at the child. Your grandmother's account has an outstanding balance. Co-pay from the last visit plus a portion of the deductible that hasn't been met yet. Kiara stared at her. Can you say that slower? Brenda paused. She looked past Kiara toward the waiting area, scanning for a parent, an uncle, someone. No one stood up. No one moved. She lowered her voice slightly. Okay, so every time your grandma sees the doctor, there's a part she has to pay. That's the copay. Then there's a bigger number, the deductible. That's like a wall. She has to pay that whole wall first before the insurance starts helping more. Kiara listened with her whole body, her chin tilted, her eyes narrowed. She was not pretending to understand. She was trying. How much is the wall? Brenda hesitated. For her plan, it's $1,400. She's paid some of it. But there's still $340 left before we can process the next round of prescriptions. Kiara turned the paper over in her hands, as if somewhere on the back there might be a number that made more sense. There wasn't. She looked at Brenda again. Is that the number we owe or the number somebody else pays? Brenda blinked. That's the number your grandmother owes. Behind her, Mabel sat in the same chair she had taken when they first arrived. Her hands rested on the plastic bag in her lap. She was watching Kiara, the way a person watches someone carry something too heavy across a long room. She did not look at the paper. She already knew it would not help her. Mabel had come to the United States from Haiti 11 years ago. She spoke English the way someone speaks a language, as they learned from television and church, and the woman at the corner store, who talked slowly enough. She could say what she needed. She could not read what the hospital needed. That had become Kiara's job. Kiara turned and walked back to Mabel. She leaned close and spoke in a voice that was softer than the one she used at the counter. Faster, too. The words were not English. They came out the way water moves through a familiar path, quick and certain. Mabel listened. Her grip tightened on the bag. She shook her head slowly, eyes down. Kiara walked back to the counter. Can we pay some now and some later? Brenda nodded carefully. We do have a payment plan option, but we need a signature from the responsible adult on the account and a valid photo ID. Kiara turned again. This time, the conversation with Mabel was shorter. When she came back, she said, she has her ID card, but it's expired. Brenda's expression shifted, not unkindly, but with the careful blankness of someone following a rule she did not write. I'm sorry, honey. We need a current ID for any new financial arrangement. Kiara did not argue. She stood still for a moment. Then she reached down and unzipped the front pocket of her backpack. She pulled out a small cloth wallet, faded purple, with a button clasp. She opened it and counted what was inside. $3 bills, 4 quarters, 2 dimes, a nickel, 3 pennies. She placed it all on the counter, $7.53 in small, careful stacks. This is what I have, she said. Brenda looked at the coins, then at the child. Then somewhere past both at a point on the wall that required nothing from her. Behind Kiara, a man in a blue jacket shifted in his chair. He let out a breath, the kind that says hurry up without using words. The line behind Kiara had grown by 2 people. One of them checked a watch. Kiara heard it. She felt the weight of the room pressing in from behind the impatience that gathered around a small person taking too long at a counter built for someone taller. She picked up the coins, one by one, put them back in the wallet, pressed the button shut, slid it into the backpack, and zipped it closed. She did not cry. She did not look embarrassed. She simply stood a little straighter as if an extra inch of height might change what the numbers said. A few seats away in the second row of waiting chairs, a man in a dark gray coat sat with his phone in his hand. His thumb had stopped moving. He was not looking at the screen anymore. He was looking at her. Oliver Kensington had not planned to be in the general waiting area that morning. His quarterly checkup was usually handled in the executive suite on the 4th floor, where the chairs were leather and the coffee came in ceramic cups, and no one waited longer than 7 minutes. But the suite was under renovation this month, something about new imaging equipment, and his assistant David had arranged for the appointment to proceed through the main clinic instead. Oliver had arrived early. He always did. Waiting was something he controlled by arriving before it could begin. He had taken a seat in the second row, opened his phone, and started reviewing a quarterly earnings summary David had sent the night before. The lobby was busy in the way hospital lobbies always are. Slow-moving, fluorescent lit, full of people sitting in plastic chairs with expressions that ranged from bored to barely holding on. Oliver had learned years ago not to look too closely at waiting rooms. They made him feel a kind of discomfort he could not solve with a signature or a phone call. But the voice had cut through. "My grandma doesn't understand what you're saying." He had glanced up the way a person glances at a noise. Then he had kept looking. The girl was small. That was the first thing he noticed. Not just young, but physically undersized. For whatever age, she was standing on her toes to see over the counter. She held the bill with both hands the way someone holds a document. They know matters even if they cannot fully read it. Oliver watched her turn to the older woman behind her. He watched the shift in her voice when she switched languages, the way her body seemed to loosen, like someone stepping from a formal room into a kitchen. Then he watched her walk back to the counter and try again. "Is that the number we owe or the number somebody else pays?" Oliver's thumb stopped scrolling. The question was precise. Too precise for someone her age. It was the kind of question a child asks when she has been taught by confusion rather than instruction. He lowered the phone to his lap. Something about the way the girl stood caught him. Not just the posture, not just the seriousness. Something underneath it, like a photograph he had seen once and could not quite place. The set of her shoulders, the tilt of her head when she read, the way she held the paper, as if the words might change if she just looked long enough. He had seen that before. Somewhere. He could not reach it. His phone buzzed. David's name appeared on the screen. Oliver raised it to his ear. "You're still at the hospital?" David asked. "Yes. Your 10:30 is in 40 minutes. Do you want me to push it?" Oliver watched the girl count coins on the counter. $7.53. He watched the receptionist look away. He watched the girl put the money back one piece at a time without making a sound. "Push it," he said. "How far?" "As far as it goes." He ended the call. David would ask later. David always asked later. But Oliver had already stopped thinking about the meeting. He was thinking about the girl, about the question she had asked, about the number she could not pay, about the fact that she had counted her money in front of a room full of adults and not one of them had moved, including him. Oliver sat with that for another moment. Then he put his phone in his coat pocket and looked at the counter again. The girl had stepped to the side, making room for the next person in line. She stood near the wall, her backpack hanging from one shoulder, looking down at the bill still folded in her hands. She was reading it again. Slowly. As if the second time through might reveal a door the first time had missed, Oliver stood. He did not stand the way a man stands when he has made a decision. He stood the way a man stands when his body has made one for him and his mind is still catching up. His coat shifted, his shoes touched the tile with a sound that felt louder than it was. He had donated to this hospital. His name was on a plaque near the surgical wing. He sat on the board of a foundation that funded pediatric care in 3 states. He had written checks with more zeros than that girl had probably ever seen in one place. But he had never stood in a waiting room and watched a child count pennies to pay a medical bill. The distance between the second row of chairs and the front counter was maybe 15 feet. Oliver covered it in slow steps, not rushing, not hesitating, moving the way a person moves when they are not sure what they will say, but know they cannot sit any longer. He stopped a few steps behind her, close enough to read the top of the bill she was holding, close enough to see the creases where she had folded it, close enough to see the pencil marks in the margin words she had written there herself, small and careful translations she had made on her own. He did not speak. Not yet. Kiara turned the way children turn when they feel someone behind them, not startled, just aware. She looked up at him. He looked down at her. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The lobby hummed around them, indifferent to whatever was about to happen next. "That's a long bill," he said. Kiara looked up at him. Her eyes moved across his face the way a child's eyes move when they are deciding whether a stranger is safe or simply another person who will tell them to move along. "I can read it," she said. There was an edge to it. Not rude. Defensive. The kind of sharpness that comes from being underestimated too many times before breakfast. Oliver did not step closer. "I didn't say you couldn't." That stopped her. She blinked once quickly, as if she had prepared a wall, and he had simply walked around it. She looked at him again, longer this time. "You waiting for somebody?" she asked. "Just an appointment," he said. "You—" "My grandma." She gestured toward Mabel without turning. "She sees the doctor today, for her sugar." Oliver nodded. "Diabetes." Kiara tilted her head slightly. "That's the long word for it. We just say sugar." "How often does she come in?" "Every month. First Tuesday." "And you come with her?" Kiara looked at him as though the question didn't make sense. Who else would come? Oliver didn't answer that. He glanced at the bill, still folded in her hands. "You read all of that yourself?" "Most of it. Some words I don't know yet." She paused. "But I write them down and look them up after." Oliver studied her. She was not performing. She was not looking for sympathy. She was simply stating how things worked the way someone describes a commute or a morning routine. This was her life. She had organized it the way she could. "Where are your parents?" he asked. The air between them shifted. Not dramatically. Just enough. Kiara was quiet for exactly 1 second. "It's just me and Grandma." Her voice didn't drop. It didn't waver. It came out flat, like a fact recited so many times. The feeling had worn smooth from it, the way a stone loses its edges in a river. Oliver heard what she didn't say. He did not ask again. Behind them, Mabel had straightened in her chair. She was watching. She did not understand every word passing between her granddaughter and this man in the dark coat, but she understood posture. She understood proximity. She understood the weight of a stranger standing near her child. Kiara glanced back at her. Their eyes met. Something passed between them, quick and silent, the kind of language that doesn't need words because it has been built over years of shared rooms and shared meals and shared worry. Kiara turned back to Oliver. "She's watching us," I noticed, Oliver said. "She doesn't like when I talk to people she doesn't know. That's smart." Kiara looked at him, surprised again. Most adults said something different. Most adults said, "Don't worry," or "It's fine," or "I'm not going to hurt you." This man had said, "That's smart," and it had landed differently, like he meant it. Oliver glanced toward Mabel, then back at Kiara. The girl turned slightly to speak to her grandmother. Her voice changed. It softened. The rhythm loosened. The English fell away, and something warmer took its place, faster, rounder, more natural. She spoke the way a person speaks when they have finally stepped out of shoes that don't quite fit. Mabel listened. Her grip on the plastic bag eased slightly. She nodded once, slow and deliberate. Oliver watched the exchange. The shift in the child's voice, the patience in it, the way she leaned toward the older woman, not down to her, but toward her, the way someone leans into a conversation they care about. And something turned inside him. Faint, unformed, like a shape seen through fog that he almost recognized but couldn't name. He had seen someone do this before. This exact thing. The shift between languages. The lean. The gentleness wrapped around efficiency. He couldn't place it. Not yet. The feeling passed through him and kept moving like a word on the tip of a tongue that refuses to arrive. He let it go. Kiara turned back. "She says you can stand there, but don't ask too many questions." Oliver almost smiled. "Fair enough." Oliver stepped past Kiara. He walked to the counter. Brenda looked up. "Put the balance on this," he said, and set a card on the surface between them. Brenda glanced at the card, then at him, then past him toward Kiara. She didn't reach for it right away. "Sir, are you a family member?" "No." "Then I need to confirm that the account holder is aware of a third-party payment." "She's sitting right there," Oliver said. "Ask her." But before Brenda could respond, Kiara was already at the counter. She had moved fast, not running, but with the sharp awareness of a child who had learned that things could change while she wasn't looking. "You can't do that," she said. Oliver looked down at her. "It's already done." "No, it's not. Grandma said we don't take money from people we don't know." She said it clearly, without hesitation, as if the rule had been repeated enough times that it lived inside her the way a prayer does. Oliver did not argue. He did not crouch down. He did not soften his voice into the careful sweetness adults sometimes used with children when they wanted obedience disguised as kindness. "Then tell your grandmother I'm not giving money," he said. "I'm paying a bill. There's a difference." Kiara studied his face. She was looking for something. Mockery, maybe. Or pity. Or the kind of generosity that came with strings so thin you didn't see them until they pulled. She didn't find it. She turned and walked back to Mabel. She leaned in close and spoke quietly. The older woman listened. Her eyes moved from Kiara to Oliver and stayed there. She studied him the way she might study a door she hadn't decided whether to walk through. Then she gave a single nod, small, steady, not gratitude, not surrender. Something closer to acknowledgement, the kind a person gives when they accept help without giving up their footing. Kiara walked back to the counter. "She can pay," she said to Brenda, nodding toward Oliver. Brenda processed the card without another word. The machine beeped. The receipt printed. She tore it off and set it on the counter. Oliver picked it up, folded it once, and handed it to Kiara. "For your records," he said. Kiara took it. She folded it again, smaller, and slid it into the front pocket of her backpack where the rest of the papers lived. Brenda watched them. She had seen thousands of transactions at that counter. Insurance approvals, payment failures, arguments about copays, tears over numbers. But she had not seen this before. Not quite like this. She spoke before she meant to. "She's been doing this every month," Brenda said. Her voice was quieter now. "Every single month." Oliver looked at her. Brenda looked at Kiara. Then she looked away the way people do when they have said something true and don't know what to do with it next. Oliver turned back toward the waiting area. He did not sit down right away. He stood near the row of chairs, looking at the child who had just put a receipt into a backpack full of medical papers, and he thought about what every month meant. It meant 12 times a year. It meant the same counter, the same terms she couldn't fully understand, the same quiet negotiation between a system that spoke in codes and a child who answered in coins. He sat down. Brenda was still watching from behind the desk. She leaned forward slightly when the next patient moved aside and spoke to Oliver in a voice that was not quite professional and not quite personal. It sat somewhere between the two, the way truth often does. "She comes the first Tuesday of every month," Brenda said. "Same time, same seat. She reads every single piece of paper they give her. If she doesn't understand a word, she asks. She always asks. She's 6 years old." Oliver didn't respond right away. He sat with that. Brenda continued quieter, now almost to herself. "We see it more than people think. Kids translating for their parents, their grandparents. Some of them are younger than her. They come in and they handle the paperwork and the phone calls and the forms, and nobody blinks because it looks like the system is working. But it's not. It's a child holding the system together." She stopped as if she had said too much. She turned back to her screen. Oliver leaned back in his chair. He had donated to this hospital. His name was on a brass plate in the corridor 2 floors above where he sat. He had funded equipment. He had attended galas. He had signed checks that paid for things he never had to see. But he had never seen this. Not from this angle. Not from the height of a counter a 6-year-old couldn't reach without standing on her toes. Across the room, Kiara had returned to her seat beside Mabel. She unzipped her backpack and pulled out a small notebook. It was worn at the corners, the cover bent from being carried every day. She opened it to a page near the middle and began writing. Slowly, carefully. one word at a time. Oliver watched her. From where he sat, he could not read what she was writing, but he could see the structure of it. On the left side of each line, a word in English printed in careful block letters. On the right, something else. Another language, another alphabet of meaning. Translations she had made on her own word by word, visit by visit, building a bridge between two worlds with a pencil and a 50-cent notebook. She was teaching herself the language of a system that had never bothered to speak hers. Oliver stared at the notebook, and this time the feeling that had been circling him all morning came closer. Not a memory yet, not a name, but a shape. A small notebook just like that one, filled with the same kind of careful handwriting. He had seen one before, in someone's hands, a long time ago. He could almost see it. Almost. But the image slipped away before it became anything he could hold. He exhaled slowly and looked down at his phone. David's name was on the screen again. Oliver ignored it. Something was happening in front of him that he did not yet understand. But he knew in the quiet way a person knows when they are standing at the edge of something that he was not going to walk away from it. Not today. Oliver stood and walked toward Mabel. Not quickly. Not with the certainty of a man who had made a decision, but with the slower gait of someone still figuring out what the decision would be. He stopped near the chair beside hers and looked at it, then at her. "May I sit down?" he asked. Mabel looked at him. Then at Kiara, who had come to stand between them the way she always did, automatic ready. Mabel said something short in her own language. Kiara turned to Oliver. "She says yes, but she wants to know why you paid." Oliver sat. He placed his hands on his knees and looked at Mabel directly. He did not look at Kiara for translation. He spoke slowly, clearly, the way a person speaks when they want to be understood, not just heard. "Your granddaughter was standing at that counter alone," he said. "No child should have to do that." Kiara translated. Her voice took on the rhythm of her grandmother's language, but the meaning held steady. She did not add to it. She did not soften it. Mabel listened. She looked at Oliver for a long time. Then she spoke. A single word. Kiara translated it. "Why?" Oliver did not answer immediately. He sat with the question the way a person sits with a weight they were not expecting to carry. Why? It was the kind of question that stripped away everything polite and left only the truth underneath. Because it was $340, he said, and she was counting pennies. Mabel studied him. Then she spoke again. Longer this time. Kiara translated carefully, matching the pace and tone of her grandmother's voice. "She says people don't pay for strangers. Not where she comes from. Not here either." Oliver nodded. "Sometimes they should." Mabel's expression did not change. She held his gaze the way a woman holds a gaze when she has lived long enough to know that kindness and danger sometimes wear the same face. She spoke again. This time, the words came out slowly, deliberately, as if each one had been chosen and weighed before leaving her mouth. Kiara translated. "She says thank you, but she says you should know she doesn't owe anybody. Not here, not back home, not anywhere." Oliver nodded once. "I know. I'm not asking her to." The room was quiet for a moment. Not the silence of awkwardness or discomfort, but the kind that happens when two people have reached the edge of what can be said with words and are deciding whether to step further or step back. Mabel looked at Kiara. She said something soft. Kiara nodded and turned to Oliver. "She says you have honest eyes. But she said that about the man who sold her the broken stove too. So don't take it too far." Oliver exhaled. Something close to a smile crossed his face, but he kept it small. He looked at Mabel and gave a slight nod, the kind that means understood. Mabel returned it, the kind that means we'll see. Kiara sat down between them, her notebook still open in her lap. She looked up at Oliver, then at her grandmother, then back at her notebook. She picked up the pencil and wrote something on a new line. Oliver did not ask what it was. Some things were not meant to be read by strangers. Not yet. His phone buzzed again. David's name. Oliver pulled it from his pocket, glanced at the screen, and pressed the side button until it went dark. He slid it back into his coat. David would call again. David always called again. But Oliver was not leaving this chair. Not yet. Not until he understood what he was sitting next to. Because something in this room, in this child, in this woman, who said she owed nobody, had reached a part of him he had not visited in a very long time, and he was not ready to name it. But he was no longer willing to ignore it. A nurse appeared at the edge of the waiting area. Johnson. Mabel. Kiara stood before Mabel did. She reached for her grandmother's arm, not pulling, just guiding the way she had clearly done many times before. Mabel rose slowly, one hand on the armrest, the other holding the plastic bag of medication. They walked together toward the hallway. Kiara half a step ahead, her backpack swinging slightly against her hip. Oliver stayed in his chair. He watched them disappear through the door. It did not close all the way. The latch caught on something, leaving a gap of maybe 2 inches. Enough to hear. The examination room was small and bright. Dr. Patel was already seated at the computer when they came in. She turned, smiled briefly, and gestured toward the examination bed. "Mrs. Johnson, please sit up here for me." Mabel looked at Kiara. Kiara nodded toward the bed. Mabel climbed up carefully, the paper cover crinkling beneath her. Dr. Patel began with the screen. "So, looking at your numbers from last time, your A1C came back higher than we want. That tells us your blood sugar hasn't been well controlled over the past few months." Kiara stood beside the bed. She was listening with her whole body. She turned to Mabel and spoke softly, translating what she could. Her voice shifted the way it always did, warmer, slower, more careful with each word, as if she were placing them into her grandmother's hands, one at a time. Mabel nodded slowly. Dr. Patel continued, "We may need to adjust your insulin dosage, and I want to check your renal function as well. That means how your kidneys are doing." Kiara's head tilted. She looked at the doctor. "What does renal mean?" In regular words, Dr. Patel paused. She looked at the child standing beside the bed, really looked. Then she said more gently, "It means kidneys. We want to make sure they're working the way they should." Kiara turned and translated again. Mabel asked something short. Kiara turned back. "She wants to know if that's a new problem or the same one." "It's related to the diabetes," Dr. Patel said. "When blood sugar stays too high for too long, it can start to affect other parts of the body. The kidneys are one of the first places we check." Kiara opened her notebook. She held the pencil, the way a child holds a pencil when writing matters more than speed. She looked up at the doctor. "Can you spell insulin for me?" Dr. Patel spelled it. Kiara wrote it down letter by letter, pressing the pencil into the page with small, deliberate strokes. Beside the English word, she wrote something in another script. Her own translation, her own system. Dr. Patel watched her. Then she asked a question that had been forming since they walked in. "Is there an adult who can come with your grandmother next time? Someone who can help with the paperwork and the instructions?" Kiara did not look up right away. She finished writing. Then she closed the pencil inside the notebook and held it against her chest. "I'm the one who comes," she said. The sentence sat in the room like something that had been true for a very long time and had only just been spoken aloud. Dr. Patel did not push. She looked at Mabel, then back at Kiara, and something in her expression shifted. Not pity, recognition. She had seen this before, in other rooms, with other children. She moved forward with the exam, but she spoke slower now. She explained each step before she did it. She used smaller words. She waited for Kiara to finish writing before she continued. Mabel sat on the bed through all of it. She watched Kiara the way a person watches someone carry a load that should not be theirs. Her eyes were not sad. They were something deeper than sad. They were the eyes of a woman who understood exactly what was happening and could not change it. Near the end of the appointment, Dr. Patel printed a new prescription and a follow-up schedule. She handed both to Kiara, not to Mabel. It was automatic. She had already understood who handled things in this family. Kiara took the papers, looked them over, and turned to Mabel. She spoke softly in her grandmother's language. Then she switched back to English, but this time She was not translating for the doctor. She was talking to her grandmother the way a person talks to someone they love when they are worried. "Nana, the doctor says you're doing better. But you have to take the medicine every day." "Every day, okay, I'll remind you." Mabel reached out and touched the side of Kiara's face. A small gesture, a hand that had done this 1,000 times. Kiara leaned into it briefly, then straightened. If this story is touching your heart, please like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Subscribe for more stories like this. Oliver heard all of it. Not clearly, not every word, but enough. He heard the doctor ask about an adult. He heard the silence that followed. He heard the child say, "I'm the one who comes," and the 4 words landed in his chest like a stone dropped into still water. He sat in the waiting area and did not move. Kiara and Mabel came out a few minutes later. Kiara held the new prescription in one hand and the follow-up schedule in the other. She stopped near the row of chairs, set her backpack on the seat, and unzipped it with practiced hands. Oliver watched the system. The backpack had 3 compartments. Kiara placed the prescription into a small Ziploc bag in the front pocket where other prescriptions already lived, folded, and dated. The follow-up schedule went into the middle section alongside what looked like older appointment cards and a bus route printout. The notebook went into the 3rd compartment beside a pencil case and a worn paperback book. Everything had a place. Everything was organized. This was not the backpack of a child going to school. This was the filing cabinet of a family. Oliver looked at it the way a man looks at a blueprint. He saw structure. He saw logic. He saw a 6-year-old who had built an entire administrative system out of Ziploc bags and pencil marks because no one had built one for her. He pulled out his phone. This time, he did not ignore the screen. He found David's number and pressed call. David answered on the first ring. "Oliver." "Cancel the rest of today," Oliver said. His voice was even, but there was something beneath it that David had learned to recognize over 11 years. All of it. Everything that isn't a legal deadline. A pause. "Done. Do you need me to come to you?" "No. I need you to look into something." Oliver lowered his voice, though Kiara was not close enough to hear. "Children who translate medical documents for their families. How common it is. What programs exist to help them. And what doesn't exist yet." David was quiet for a moment. "Is this for the foundation?" Oliver watched Kiara zip the backpack shut and swing it over one shoulder. She reached for Mabel's hand. "It's for me," he said. He ended the call. Oliver was not a man who acted on impulse. He had built what he had by seeing systems before other people saw them and understanding where they broke before they broke. He planned. He measured. He moved when the data told him to move. But data was not what had moved him today. Today, it was a Ziploc bag full of prescriptions organized by a child who could not yet spell the word insulin without asking. Today, it was the gap between the counter and the top of a 6-year-old's head. Today, it was the sound of a doctor asking, "Is there an adult?" and the silence that answered. He stood and walked toward the exit not because he was leaving, but because Kiara and Mabel were heading there too. They reached the glass doors at the same time. Kiara pushed the heavy door open with both hands and held it for Mabel, her small body braced against the weight of it. Oliver stepped forward and held the door above her. Kiara looked up. She did not thank him. She just shifted her grip and let him take the weight. Outside, the air was warm. The parking lot stretched out in rows of cars glinting under the late morning sun. Kiara and Mabel turned left toward the bus stop at the edge of the hospital grounds. A metal bench, a faded schedule behind cracked plastic. Oliver spoke. "The bus doesn't come for another hour. I saw the schedule on the way in." Kiara stopped. She looked at him. "We always wait. You don't have to. Not today." She studied his face. The same careful look she had given him at the counter. Then she turned to Mabel and spoke quickly in her grandmother's language. The old woman listened, looked at Oliver, and said something back. Kiara translated. She says, "Okay." "But she sits in the front." Oliver nodded. He led them across the lot to a dark sedan parked near the far end. It was clean, but not flashy. He opened the passenger door for Mabel, who settled in with her bag on her lap and her back straight against the seat. She looked out the windshield the way a woman looks out a window when she is in a place she did not choose but has decided to accept. Kiara climbed into the back. She placed the backpack on her knees and rested her hands on top of it. Oliver adjusted the mirror, started the engine, and pulled out of the lot. For a minute, no one spoke. Then Kiara's voice came from behind him, lighter now. "You have a nice car." "Thank you." "Is it yours or the hospital's?" Oliver glanced at her in the mirror. "Mine." She nodded, absorbing that. "Do you have kids?" "No." "A dog?" "No." She considered this. "What do you do for work?" "I build things," he said. Kiara leaned forward slightly. Like houses, Oliver thought about that for a second. Like systems. She sat back. "That sounds boring." "Sometimes it is," he said. Mabel turned her head slightly at the sound of the exchange. She didn't understand all of it. But she heard the rhythm. She heard the ease. And something in her posture softened, just barely the way a door eases open when the draft changes. Kiara spoke again. "I like reading." "What kind of books?" "The ones with hard words. I look them up after." Oliver met her eyes in the mirror. "You look up words you don't know." Kiara shrugged. "How else do you learn them?" Oliver didn't answer. He looked at the road. The sun fell across the dashboard in long, warm lines. The car moved through quiet streets, and for a few minutes, the three of them existed in the kind of silence that doesn't need filling, the kind that happens when strangers begin slowly to become something else. The building had no elevator. 3 flights of stairs, narrow and clean, with a metal railing that had been painted so many times. The layers had built up smooth under Oliver's hand. Mabel climbed slowly. Each step was deliberate, her hand gripping the rail, her breathing steady but heavy. Kiara walked behind her, one small hand resting lightly on the center of her grandmother's back. Not pushing, not pulling, just there. Oliver followed last. He said nothing. The stairwell smelled faintly of bleach and something being cooked on another floor. At the top, Mabel unlocked the door. The apartment was small. 1 bedroom, a kitchen that opened directly into a living room, a single window that let in a rectangle of warm light. The floor was swept. The surfaces were wiped clean. Everything was in its place, not because there was extra, but because there was only enough. Kiara's bed was the sofa. Oliver saw it immediately. A folded blanket at one end, a pillow at the other, and a stack of library books lined up along the armrest like small soldiers standing at attention. 6 books, spines facing out. The one on top had a cracked cover and a title in large print. On the refrigerator, a calendar was pinned with a magnet from a pharmacy. Hospital appointments were written in marker, 1 per month, in Kiara's handwriting. Small, careful letters. Each completed date had a check mark beside it. This month's was already checked. The kitchen table held a second notebook. Oliver noticed it as he sat down. It was older than the one Kiara carried in her backpack. The cover was bent and soft, held shut with a rubber band. Inside, the pages were full. Word after word, line after line, English on the left, translations on the right. The same system, but more entries, more wear. He did not touch it, but he looked at it long enough for Kiara to notice. "That's my first one," she said. "I filled it up, so I got a new one." Oliver nodded. On the wall near the kitchen, a poster hung with tape at the corners. It was a school project, the kind printed on colored paper and decorated with stickers. The title read, "My Community Helpers." Below it, hand-drawn figures lined up in a row. A police officer, a doctor, a firefighter, a teacher, and at the end, drawn in pencil, while the others were in crayon, a smaller figure. A child standing next to an older person holding a piece of paper in one hand. Beneath the drawing in Kiara's handwriting, it said, "Me." Oliver stared at that drawing for a long time. Mabel had moved to the kitchen. Without asking, she filled a kettle and set it on the stove. She took out 2 mugs and a box of tea. Her movements were slow but sure, the hands of a woman who had made tea in this kitchen 1,000 times and did not need permission to do it once more. She placed a mug in front of Oliver and poured. He drank. The tea was strong, slightly sweet. It tasted like a home that had been held together by hands that never stopped working. Oliver's eyes moved across the room. Across the sofa bed, the library books, the calendar, the notebooks, the poster. Then they landed on a shelf near the window. A small shelf wooden holding a few things. A ceramic bowl, a candle in a glass jar, and a photograph in a frame. The photograph was old, faded at the edges. A young black woman stood in front of a building, smiling. She wore nurse's scrubs, pale blue, and a name badge clipped to her chest. Her hair was pulled back. Behind her, the letters above the entrance were visible. It was a hospital. Oliver stood up from the chair without deciding to. He crossed the room. He picked up the frame. He held it close enough to see the badge. The name was too small to read, but the face was not. "Who is that?" he asked. Kiara looked up from the table. "That's my mama." Oliver did not move. He held the photograph, and the room became very still. The face in the picture, the smile, the angle of the jaw, the way she stood slightly forward, as if ready to move towards something rather than wait for it to come. 8 years ago, a rainy night, a highway just south of the city. His car had spun, hit the median, glass everywhere. He could not move his left arm. There was blood, his own, on the dashboard, on the steering wheel, on the seat beside him. Headlights from passing cars streaked across the wet pavement like long white scars. He had crawled out. He could not remember how. Then he was on the ground, and someone was there, a woman in scrubs, running, not from the hospital building, but from the parking lot beside it. She had been leaving after her shift. She had seen the crash. She had knelt beside him. She had pressed her hands against his shoulder where the blood was coming from. She had said something. He had not heard it clearly, but her hands had been steady. Her voice had been calm. She had not looked afraid. She had looked like someone who did this, who held people together with nothing but her hands and the decision not to walk away. The ambulance came. He was loaded in. He passed out. When he woke, she was gone. He asked for her. The nurses on the morning shift did not know who he was talking about. The night shift had ended. The woman had clocked out. He searched. He asked the hospital. They told him the nurse from that shift had left her position a few months after. No forwarding information, no contact number. He had looked for the woman who saved his life, and the system had swallowed her whole. Now she stood in a frame on a shelf in a third-floor apartment, wearing the same scrubs, the same face, the same posture. Oliver set the photograph down, carefully, the way a person sets down something that has just changed everything. He looked at Kiara. "Where is your mother now?" The room was very quiet. Kiara held his gaze. She did not look away. She did not fidget. She answered the way she answered everything directly without decoration, as if the truth did not need softening because it had already been lived. "She died," Kiara said, 2 years ago. Oliver sat back down. He did not sit the way he had before. Something had shifted in the center of him, some weight that had not been there a moment ago, and his body adjusted to carry it. The tea in front of him was still warm. He wrapped his hands around the mug but did not drink. Mabel had settled into the chair across from him. She watched his face. She did not ask what had happened. She did not need to. She had seen a man look at her daughter's picture and go pale, and that was enough. Oliver stared at the table. The older notebook sat there, its rubber band holding it closed. Joy's daughter's notebook, Joy's mother's kitchen, Joy's family. The woman who had knelt beside him on wet asphalt 8 years ago and refused to let a stranger bleed out on the side of a road. Joy. Her name was Joy. He said it once silently inside his own head. Then again. "How did she die?" he asked. Kiara looked at Mabel. She spoke to her grandmother in the language they shared, and the question passed between them like something carried with 2 hands. Mabel's expression changed. Not sharply. Slowly. "The way a sky changes before weather," she spoke. Kiara translated. "She got sick. She worked too many shifts. Double shifts. Sometimes 3 days without sleeping. After she left the hospital, she didn't have insurance anymore. She didn't go to the doctor. She said it would pass. It didn't. Oliver listened. He set the mug down on the table so gently, it made no sound at all. Mabel spoke again. Kiara translated. By the time she went, it was too late. The tumor had grown. They said if she had come earlier, maybe. But she didn't have the money. And she didn't have the coverage. Oliver looked at the photograph on the shelf. The woman in the scrubs, the name badge, the smile. The woman who saved his life had lost hers in the same system that was now charging her mother $340 a month. Oliver did not speak for a long time. The apartment was quiet. Outside, a bus passed. Somewhere below, a door closed. "Kiara," he said finally, "can you get your grandmother a glass of water?" Kiara looked at him. Then she looked at Mabel. Something passed between them, some understanding that Kiara could not name but Mabel recognized. The old woman gave a small nod. Kiara stood and went to the kitchen. She took a glass from the shelf and turned on the faucet. The water ran. Oliver moved his chair slightly closer to Mabel. He did not wait for Kiara to translate. He spoke slowly, clearly. Each word placed with the kind of care a man uses when he knows the words must do more than communicate. "Your daughter saved my life," he said. Mabel looked at him. Her eyes searched his face. Not with surprise, not with confusion, with the slow, deep recognition of a woman who had always known her daughter was that kind of person. "She was like that," Mabel said. The words came out in English, accented, slow, but clear. It was the first time she had spoken directly to Oliver without Kiara between them. She had chosen this moment. She had chosen these words. Oliver exhaled. "I didn't know until today," he said. "I looked for her. I couldn't find her." Mabel watched him. Her hands rested on the table. They were still. Oliver leaned forward slightly. "I want to help. Not because I owe you. Because she would have wanted Kiara to have more than this." He did not gesture. He did not need to. They both knew what this meant. Mabel did not answer right away. She looked at the shelf, at Joy's photograph, at the poster on the wall, at the notebook on the table. "Kiara has enough," she said. Oliver nodded. "She has enough love. She doesn't have enough support." Mabel held his gaze. The two of them sat across from each other in a kitchen, no bigger than a closet, and the distance between their lives was enormous, and the thing connecting them was a woman who was no longer alive. Mabel did not say yes. She did not say no. She said, "Tell me what you mean." Oliver reached for his phone. He dialed David. This time, when the call connected, he did not keep it short. "I need you to research something," he said. "Medical interpreter programs, federal requirements for language access in hospitals, something called Section 1557 of the Affordable Care Act. Find out what it requires. Then find out what this hospital actually provides." David was quiet for a moment. And look into support programs for children who act as translators for their families, educational resources, legal aid. What exists? What should exist but doesn't? Is this connected to the earlier request? "It's the same thing," Oliver said, "just deeper." He ended the call and set the phone on the table. He looked at Kiara, who had come back with the water and was now sitting beside Mabel, her notebook open again. Always open. "Kiara," he said. She looked up. "There are people whose job is to do what you do. At the hospital, translators, people who speak your grandmother's language and explain the medical words. They're supposed to be there for free." Did anyone ever tell you that? Kiara shook her head slowly. "No." "Did anyone ever offer one to your grandmother?" "No." Oliver leaned back. He looked at the ceiling for a moment, then back at her. Under federal law, hospitals that receive government funding are required to provide language services for patients who need them. Your grandmother has the right to a translator. She has had that right every single time she walked through those doors. Kiara stared at him. The notebook was still open. Her pencil was still in her hand, but she was not writing. "Then why didn't they come?" she asked. Oliver met her eyes. "Because sometimes systems only work when someone asks them to." Kiara was quiet for a moment. "I didn't know I could ask." "Now you do," he said. Something shifted in her face. not relief. Not gratitude. Something sharper. Something closer to the expression of a person who has just learned that the weight they have been carrying was never theirs to begin with. She looked down at her notebook. All those words, all those visits, all those mornings, standing on her toes at the counter, reading bills she could barely understand, asking Brenda to speak slower, writing down insulin one letter at a time. She had been carrying the weight of a system that was supposed to carry her. Oliver watched her. He did not say anything more. Some truths needed room to settle. Mabel reached over and placed her hand on top of Kiara's. The old woman did not speak. She did not need to. Her hand said what words in any language could not. Oliver sat in that kitchen, in that small apartment on the 3rd floor with no elevator, and he understood something with a clarity he had not felt in years. This was not about paying a bill. This was not about one family. This was about the space between what a system promised and what it actually delivered, and the people who fell into that space, and the children who tried to fill it with pencils and Ziploc bags, and a courage that should never have been required of them in the first place. He was not going to write a check and walk away. He was going to build something. 1 week later, Mabel walked into the hospital for her follow-up appointment. She took the same entrance. She passed the same front desk. Brenda was there, and she looked up the way she always did. But this time, a woman was already waiting in the lobby. She stood when Mabel came in. She was in her 40s, calm professional, wearing a lanyard with a hospital badge. She greeted Mabel in her own language. The words came out warm and unhurried, and Mabel stopped walking. She looked at the woman. Then she looked at Kiara. Kiara stood beside her grandmother, backpack on hands on the straps. She had been ready. She had been ready the way she was always ready, with the notebook and the pencil and the Ziploc bag and the questions she had practiced the night before. But the woman spoke again, gesturing toward the hallway. She explained that she would be accompanying Mabel into the appointment today. She would translate everything the doctor said. She would help with any paperwork afterward. Mabel looked at Kiara once more. Something passed between them. Not relief exactly. Something quieter than that. Something closer to permission. Kiara nodded. Mabel followed the interpreter down the hallway. The door to the exam room closed behind them. And for the first time in as long as she could remember, Kiara was not on the other side of it. She stood in the waiting area. She looked at the chairs. She looked at the counter where Brenda sat. She looked at the hallway where her grandmother had just disappeared. Then she sat down. She did not know what to do. For a full minute, she sat with her hands on her knees, staring ahead, the way a person sits when a task they have done every day is suddenly no longer theirs. The absence of it felt larger than the task itself. Then she unzipped her backpack. She reached inside, past the Ziploc bags, past the notebook, past the prescription folder, and pulled out a book. A library book, the one from the top of the stack, on her sofa bed. She opened it to the page she had dog-eared and began to read. Not medical words. Not insurance terms. Not translations for someone else. Just a story. Just words she had chosen for herself. Brenda glanced over from the desk. She watched the girl reading. She did not say anything. But she smiled briefly, the way a person smiles when something small and good happens in a place where small and good things are rare. Oliver was not there. He did not need to be. His presence that morning existed in the interpreter who had been hired through a language access initiative he had funded 3 days after leaving Mabel's apartment. It existed in the updated insurance enrollment that a legal aid worker, also arranged by Oliver, had helped Mabel complete. It existed in the letter the hospital had received from Oliver's foundation, requesting a formal audit of their language services compliance. David called Oliver that afternoon. The hospital didn't have a formal language access program for Haitian Creole speakers, David said. They do now. We've partnered with a local interpreter service. It launched Monday. Oliver was in his office. He set down the pen he had been holding. How many patients does it serve? David checked his notes. 47 in the first week. Oliver was quiet. Then he said, "That's 47 Kiaras who don't have to stand at that counter anymore." David did not respond right away. Then softly he said, "Yes, sir." Oliver ended the call. He looked at the window. The city stretched out below him the way it always did, but it looked different now. Not smaller, just more detailed, more specific, full of counters and waiting rooms and children holding papers they could barely read. 3 weeks later, Oliver sat in a plastic chair at the back of a classroom. The chair was too small for him, his knees pressed against the desk in front of it. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, and the walls were covered in construction paper and alphabet posters and drawings held up with tape. He had not told anyone he was coming. He had asked the school's front office if visitors were allowed for the project presentations. They had said yes. He had signed in, taken a name tag, and found the room. Kiara's class was presenting their projects one by one. The theme was printed on the whiteboard in large green letters. "My community helper." A boy went first. He talked about his uncle who was a firefighter. He brought a helmet. The class clapped. A girl went next. She talked about her neighbor who was a nurse. She had made a poster with photos. The class clapped again. Then Kiara stood up. She walked to the front of the room, carrying 2 things. Her notebook, the old one, the one with the worn cover and the rubber band, and a piece of paper she had written on the night before her notes for the presentation folded once down the middle. She did not use the paper. She set it on the desk and spoke from memory. "My community helper is me," she said. The room was quiet, not the restless quiet of children waiting for their turn, a different kind. "My grandma came to this country when she was already old. She doesn't read English. She doesn't understand the papers they give her at the hospital, so I go with her, every month. I read the bills. I talk to the lady at the desk. I go in with the doctor, and I tell my grandma what they say. Then I tell the doctor what she says back." She held up the notebook. "This is where I write the words I don't know. I look them up later. Some of them are really hard, like insulin, and deductible, and renal function." She paused. "I still don't really know what that last one means, but I wrote it down." A few of the children laughed softly. Not at her. With her, Kiara continued. "I used to think I had to do it because nobody else would. Now I know that I did it because I love my grandma, but I also know that nobody should have to do it alone." She stopped. She looked at her teacher, then at the class. Then, almost by accident, her eyes drifted to the back of the room. Oliver was there, sitting in the small chair with his knees pressed against the desk. He was not smiling. He was not crying. He was just watching the way a person watches when they are seeing something they helped make possible without needing anyone to know. He clapped. The class followed. And Kiara smiled. It was small. It was quick. But it was the first time in this entire story that her face had done that, not out of politeness, not out of nervousness, but because something inside her had eased enough to let it through. After the presentations, the children scattered. Parents arrived. The teacher began stacking chairs. Oliver stood near the door waiting. Kiara came over. She was holding the notebook against her chest, the way she always held things that mattered. "You came," she said. "I did." She looked at him. "How did you know about it? Your teacher mentioned it." "I asked if I could come." Kiara considered that. "Did you like it?" Oliver reached into the bag he had brought. He pulled out a notebook. It was new, hardcover, cream-colored pages thick and smooth, the kind that held ink without bleeding through. He held it out to her. Kiara took it. She turned it over in her hands, feeling the weight of it. She opened the cover. On the first page, in clean handwriting, one word was written in the center of the paper: joy. Kiara looked at the word. She did not speak. She touched it with the tip of her finger lightly, the way a person touches something they are afraid might disappear. Then she closed the notebook and held it against her chest, pressing it flat the way she had held the old one. But differently. Tighter. Oliver spoke quietly. "You don't have to translate for anyone anymore. But if you want to keep learning words, this one's for the words you choose." Kiara looked up at him. "Can I write any word I want?" "Any word. Even big ones. Especially big ones." She held the notebook with both hands. She didn't thank him. She didn't need to. The way she held it said everything. Oliver stepped back. Kiara turned and walked toward the school entrance, where Mabel stood waiting at the gate, her hand resting on the metal railing, her face turned toward the door. Kiara reached her. She took her grandmother's hand with her free one. The notebook stayed in the other, held close, like something that had been missing and had finally arrived. Mabel looked down at her. She asked something in their shared language, a short question, soft and familiar. Kiara laughed. She answered in the same language, quick and easy, the words tumbling out the way they did when she was not translating for anyone, when she was simply speaking because she wanted to. They walked away from the school together. The afternoon light fell warm across the sidewalk. Kiara's backpack bounced gently with each step. The old notebook was inside it. The new one was in her hand. Some children carried words for others before they were old enough to choose their own, but every child deserved a blank page. This story reminds us that across the United States, millions of children serve as language brokers for their families, translating medical instructions, financial documents, and legal forms that no child should have to carry alone. This is not early maturity. It is a burden that belongs to systems, not to 6-year-olds. True kindness is not a single payment or a single gesture. It is the willingness to look at a broken system and ask why it is broken, and then to do something about it. One person can begin that work, but the system must finish it. This story also reminds us that dignity does not depend on language, income, or age. Kiara did not need to be rescued. She needed to be supported. There is a difference, and that difference matters more than most people realize. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. However, the issue of child language brokering is real and affects millions of families. If you or someone you know needs language access support at a healthcare facility, you have the right to a free interpreter under federal law. The content is intended for storytelling education and emotional illustration.